you have an idea, you have a concern, you need to advocate for yourself. All of those require language.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zhao. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast for risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives offering real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm Michael Zhao, and I'm the founder and CEO of Yellowbird. Joining us today is Monique Lewis, the CEO of Next to Native Language Learning and a bilingual language expert with years of experience in workforce development in ESL and education. Monique, this is such an honor for me to have you on this podcast. We met through a very meaningful relationship that we both have that's in the construction, mental health and suicide awareness and prevention program that a dear friend of ours is putting on. And you told me about things you were doing. And I first want to ask you, just for our listeners, tell us about why you are a subject matter expert, a little bit about your background, and a little bit about your personal life and your journey to this point.
Thank you for having me, by the way. That's kind of a big deal, so I'm happy to be here. Man, my background, first of all, I learned my second language, I'm getting old, so more than 20 years ago. I don't want to tell you the number. Just know that it's more than 20. And that really started my love. I didn't know that it would it would land me where I am now. But I learned my second language when I was in my 20s, and it gave me a peer into what that's like. And when I say that, I didn't know how it would help me later. But when you learn another language, you have all of this knowledge, things that you know, but you cannot express. You don't have the language for it. So it makes you feel kind of just infantilizing a little bit until you get the language, So learning the culture and so forth, it took time. Fast forward, I got certified to be a language instructor, ended up getting involved in teaching adults, which is very different than teaching young people. Even our bandwidth, most of us, if you get over 35, you could have a mate, children, full-time job, a host of different worries and concerns, and your bandwidth is just not the same as when we're 15 with, no worries living with our parents. So got years of experience teaching adults. And it came down to landing in construction. I wish I swung the hammer, but I support the hands that do. And what got into construction after I learned, actually from Caroline Brigman over at CAGC, she shared with me that there had been a fatality. This was about 2 years ago. She shared with me there had been a fatality at a construction site in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's when the link was inextricably made in my mind between language and life. And I said, oh, I need to pivot. And literally, I pivoted from B2C business to a B2B business, and have been addressing high-risk industries like construction to close this gap so that everyone goes home.
Thank you for giving such an articulate explanation of why you went down this path. Before we get into what you do, which is amazing, can we talk about your family? And we started to talk about it offline. I said, you know what? I want to wait and hear about this and your little people, which I also have two little people. Your young family, which is not as young as it used to be. So please do tell.
Sure. My husband and I will be married 19 years in November, which is kind of nuts. You may feel the same way, but time is crazy. Time is a weird thing the way it passes. I mean, you see a visual representation in your children, but if you had to literally say, how long has it been? How long does it feel it's been? It doesn't feel like it's been 19 years, which I guess is good. But yeah, we're about to see 19 years. Our tiny people are 10 and 12, soon to change because we will see our first 13-year-old who's already been teenagering around, but he'll be official to the club in November. It's my son. And my sweet tiny girl, she's just delicious. And I heard you talking about your beautiful daughter. I don't know, having both sexes, it's just different. It's just different. And my tiny one, my girl was my last. Maybe a story for another time, but when she was born, her birth became extremely difficult about halfway through. They were actually preparing me never to meet her. Her complications became so bad through my pregnancy with her that they were telling me that it's not likely that I would survive her birth. So that's just a different kind of entry into the world. I ended up going through 2 major surgeries that normally are 6 months to a year apart. They did them 3 weeks apart. I am so fortunate to be alive and speaking and talking. So every year of her life is a year that I've really been gifted because for all intents and purposes, medically, I should not be here. So she will be 11 next month. So those are our tiny people.
And by the way, that story, when people say, why do you do this? This is why I do this. This is why I have this podcast. It's not because of safety regulations and compliance. And it's not even about lead generation and doing business with Yellowbird. It's having these conversations that talk about the human experience. And, it's interesting because I think people who've gone through these things, and you and I have talked about this a fair amount, being born with a disability. I was also born very, very high risk because I also had a tethered spinal cord, which is most people don't know what that is, but it's basically a spina bifida where your spinal cord is at your tailbone. And my body happened to cure it, and I won't say cure, but heal itself by filling in the hole. And I am older than you are, and I've been married 25 years, by the way, which also feels like yesterday. Hard to believe 2000 was 25 years ago.
Right. Let's not even talk about how old that makes us feel.
Yeah, that's crazy. But it was a time before the ultrasounds and the technology and everything was there. And candidly, it's probably good because with the litany of challenges that my parents would have seen in there, they were very faithful and they're very, they want to do the best they could do for me no matter how long I survived. I would have still been born. But I will tell you, it would have been a decision because of looking at that. And then I ended up being me. And I'm very fortunate to have been given that gift. And you're very fortunate to have been given the gift to stay alive, to watch your beautiful girl grow up. So what a wonderful story. And your husband, you guys have been married 19 years. Now, what does he do for work? And what is the story?
It's funny. Before, we weren't in the same industry, but now we kind of are. So my husband is a draftsman. So he drafts beautiful homes. He started out in industrial drafting, but for the duration of our marriage, maybe up until a year before, so around 20 years, he's drafted residential properties. And he supported our family for all these years doing this type of work. So now we're kind of right next to each other in the same industry. Never saw that coming, but it's kind of nice.
It's fantastic. My son's studying to be an architect. And from the time he was a little boy, he always liked to build things. And it's funny because even during the summertime, he'll come over to my little wood shop that I have at the house and he'll make things, like picture frames, but he'll make them. He won't buy them, or a mirror. And I think when you have that creativity it's really a wonderful thing. And by the way, having an older boy, I can tell you from personal experience, is very good when they're close enough in age and the boy is older, not because of the protective thing that which is the bravado piece, but it's also, they look out for their little sisters. And, my daughter, I told the story in another podcast, so I won't repeat the depth of it, but she did have a little fender bender the first week she was driving, trying to park into a parking spot. And she did not, she did not call me. She called her brother.
I love it. That's the goal, though.
It absolutely is. And my wife went back to work recently, and he'll come over when she was in summer, and he goes to college not too far away, about 20 minutes. And he'll come over and hang out with his little sister, and we won't even know they were there. Oh, yeah, Nick was over today. So you have a lot of fun things. Hopefully, you are as fortunate as I am to have two kids that love being together. So the theme of this podcast, and getting us back on path, is about language and communication and employee retention and the role of language in fostering a safety culture. Not just verbal language, but written language, signage, and so forth. So going back to your journey of language, and how old were you? Not not how old were you? I'm going to ask a different question. Where were you in your life when you learned how to speak a second language? Were you still in a younger stage of your life, or were you an adult at that point?
I mean, barely an adult. I mean, we learn later on that 18 is not an adult. But I was a little higher than that. I was around 21. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I'd never really been anywhere else. And I once I graduated college, I graduated from Salem College, and I realized, oh, Michael, I realized that by the time I graduated, I did not want to go into broadcast journalism. And I was like, oh, this is a heck of a time to realize that in my senior year. But anyway, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina for a time. And so I was 21 out on my own for the first time, seeing what I could do, checking out my wings and seeing how far I could spread them. And I went to a convention. My family and myself were all Jehovah's Witnesses. So I went to a convention. We have them every year. So there was a statistic that I apparently won't forget because it's been more than 20 years. But they said only 1 in 5 people are learning about the Bible in English. 4 out of 5 are learning about it in a different language, even here in the United States. So I really thought about it. I was like, well, I'm not married, no kids. I got a lot of my bandwidth, brain bandwidth, because I'm only 21. And I was like, I could totally do that. So at the time, we had a double kingdom hall, which simply means one building, 2 salons or 2 auditoriums. One side was Spanish, one side was English. So it wasn't like I had to travel somewhere else, or put great expense toward the effort. So I would study everything at home. Jehovah's Witnesses learn the same thing all over the world. You can look at the schedules and so forth. So I would study everything at home in English. We didn't have everything in the phone, so actual books I would study at home. When it was time to go to the meeting, I would leave all of my English stuff at home and take only the Spanish. So that by the time I got there, I could see, or I could hear rather, I knew the gist of what was going to be talked about because I pre-studied. So while I'm listening, I'm matching up. Pueblo, people, Biblia, Bible, cosas así. So I'm just matching them up. And it took I was in a kingdom hall where people were from Colombia, La República Dominicana, España, and every way that you could hear hello and goodbye and everything in between was in one building. I could speak it in 7 months. And that experience, oh my goodness, it taught me what it really takes. Because a lot of the programs, I think that most Americans, unfortunately, well, I'm saying unfortunately given my background, but I think it's unfortunate that most Americans only speak one language. Aside from the work that I do, even the cognitive benefits of speaking another language are innumerable. It helps to stave off, degenerative issues, Alzheimer's, dementia. So it strengthens us cognitively, but yet many of us, a great majority of us, don't tap into that. But looking at that, it helped me to really realize what it takes, because a lot of us do try Duolingo and things like that. We have them on our phone and we have these streaks, which is commendable, but it doesn't take you to conversational ability. You learn vocabulary and grammar, which are absolute stepping stones, if you will. Those are valuable. But if we want to get to the level of using it, maybe not natively, but maybe next to native, we have to kind of click over to this different level. And going through that process helped me to unlock that, because I tried little apps and things before too. Took it in college and high school, and I could only say like mesa, me llamo Mónica. It's not enough.
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
Donde está el baño?
yeah.
The
¿Dónde está
most
la
important
biblioteca?
thing. Yeah, biblioteca. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
going through
So
that experience
I
helped
went
me
through
to,
Spanish 3 and I barely can say anything. So it's same deal, but
yeah.
immersive. And that's actually an interesting segue. So in the world that we live in, from a safety perspective, but also just from a language perspective, immersion is so important and really becoming part of the journey. And I liken a lot of the theme throughout all of the, I mean, I'm doing dozens and dozens of podcasts and I enjoy it so much. And the ongoing theme is the cultural aspect of ownership and how you need to own your responsibility and the responsibility of for others to look out for each other and to build a better way of keeping each other and yourself safe. But you have to immerse yourself to do that. And if you go for, in the Christian religion, you'll go on different missions. I don't know if you in Jehovah's so witnessism, if you do missionaries and things, but I've found with friends and friends' kids and and even at the schools and so forth, they'll go down and they'll volunteer, and they'll come back speaking proper Spanish, or maybe improper Spanish, but language. They'll actually speak it, communicating it. Kind of. I don't think I speak proper English, but I certainly can communicate in it. So it's kind of that same thing. I think that immersive aspect of what we do. So you were telling me a story early on about this fatality and the person who had told you about it. Can you give us details without getting overly graphic, but kind of giving us a little bit of color for what the moment was that had you say, okay, I think this is an important thing for me to dedicate my life to?
The CAGC, of course, as we know, is a trade association, incredible trade association, by the way. They do incredible things, all these supportive things they do throughout the year.
The acronyms. We need to make sure we talk about the acronyms. So
Oh my goodness.
CATC.
Do we not live and die by acronyms? Carolina's AGC. So the education coordinator, of course, is searching out what's needed by the contractors and general, the GCs underneath, or the general contractors underneath the CAGC's umbrella. So there was a request for language access, help and corporate training. So that's how she and I got into this conversation as a language training provider. So when we were talking, she was telling me, I think she was just kind of sharing. I don't know that she intended to say it, but I certainly was listening. So she mentioned that there was a fatality, and I thought, a fatality? And she said, yeah, there was a scaffolding, if I remember correctly, a scaffolding accident where there was a fall. And the thing that most piqued my interest, or I don't know, piqued my interest is the right term because this is certainly a sensitive thing, but caught my attention, is that this was the determination after OSHA had gotten involved. So this was not speculation or a hypothesis as to why this occurred. After OSHA got involved, the determination was that this fatality occurred due to the language barrier. And given my background, 4 sounds like 14 sounds like 40 on a loud construction site where it's not your language. To you and I as native speakers, 4 it absolutely sounds different from 14 and 40, but not if you're a language learner. They sound very similar. So when you're dealing with those types of, large capacity for misunderstanding, it can be as benign as a misunderstanding, rework, having to do something more than once, which is a concern to the bottom line. But in this case, it was in this malignant form where a person lost their life due to the language barrier. So when she shared that with me, it did. It absolutely kind of changed the DNA of my company because, again, given my background, I know how important language is, not just to communication, but to dignity and feeling seen, being able to communicate your concerns, your desires. What about unpacking a near miss? If you don't have the language, you may see that's going to eventually collapse or whatever the case may be, and you can't unpack that. So eventually, you're going to be looking at an incident report because it's going to happen if no one addresses it. So even those things, you have an idea, you have a concern, you need to advocate for yourself. All of those require language.
I envision somebody on a construction site who happens to look over and see something that is potentially very dangerous, and not having the ability to communicate that effectively and quickly. Everybody says, see something, say something. That's the big thing. And well, if you can't communicate effectively, that's a big deal. When we were preparing for this call, one of the conversations we had was not just about verbal language, but it was actually the ability to read and write. And how often it is that, especially those who are doing the physical labor on job sites, may or may not have the literacy levels that perhaps the superintendent does, or even the higher level workers do. So do you want to elaborate on that a little bit because I thought it was such an interesting point and one that I hadn't really thought about.
Absolutely. In the education world, we call it preliterate. That's the category that it fits under. So looking at that, it simply means you either lack the ability or have limited ability in reading and writing in your first language. And it's not uncommon. Now, it's not to say that every immigrant has this, fits in this category. It's not a sweeping generalization, but it's actually very common because many times it can be the case that in their country, they had to start working to support the family at a much earlier age than we would in the United States. That being the case, They may not have had the opportunity to go to get formal education, either at all or a very limited amount of time. So their world is verbal in their first language, but still verbal. So I want to make sure I make this point because many people that I respect, I think of Loretta Mulberry comes to mind immediately. Her life's work is in translation, which is extremely important. I would, though, challenge to say that is a baseline effort or a baseline first step. Because I think that many construction companies that we talk to, they've not quite taken that first step where their onboarding, their handbook, their benefits, none of that is translated. So they're handing all of this information to a new employee. New employee cannot digest any of that. However, if we stop rather at translating our materials, onboarding, our signage, if we stop there, we could be missing being able to truly communicate with lots of people. And Michael, besides that, even for you and I don't know about you, but my inbox is, well, I know your inbox is under control because now you have, her name just left me, but you have an awesome virtual
Angie.
assistant. Angie. So your inbox is under control. Mine is not yet. With that being the case, you look at your email, all of it's in English, but sometimes you're just like, I'm not reading all of this. So even if we were to hand them all the information and they could speak, they could read in Spanish, fine. It's a lot to digest. Unfortunately, we're in a world where videos and this action, the scrolling that we're all doing, it has really caused our brains to be very good at forgetting information. Our attention spans are shorter, which is a whole nother matter as parents. That makes me terrified, but that's another matter. But looking at all of that and kind of the way our brains are being groomed in the modern age, it is paramount to save life to have a verbal component to these written and translated efforts. That's not going far enough.
It's interesting you should say that because Yellowbird, we have a decent amount of translation work, and because people will come and take their safety documentation, and let's just say it's a national builder or a national drywaller. Well, if you go to California, you need to meet Cal OSHA requirements. You go to Arizona, there's ADOSH, which is Arizona's Department of Health and Safety, which is not federal, but it's state run. And so there are these state requirements. So you need to first get the English to accommodate the local jurisdiction, and hiring a local person to do that is a better play, which is one of the things that Yellowbird does. But equally as important, I find that folks will run their documentation through a translation AI, but if you read it, it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of things that don't make sense, and if you don't have somebody who's actually a native speaker or speaks the language properly and very fluently, it's a good practice, because at the end of the day, if you haven't documented things well and you haven't put protocols in place, what are you going to train somebody to do? If you haven't taken the effort to actually create that structure for your team, then you say, well, we have a manual. I said, have you ever read the manual? It's not practical. Often, and I still find this to be quite shocking, payroll companies will give people generalized safety manuals as part of their handbooks. Like, there's no such thing as a generalized safety manual. I mean, everything we do in this country in work, you could go to 2 different sites that do the exact same thing, but because of their geography, because of the environment, because of the people, because of the circumstances, the protocols would need to be nuanced, to the group that's there. So I find an opportunity, but also a big risk, and something that we as a community need to talk about, because I think it's very challenging for people to operate. You have so many things, and candidly, without getting political, because I don't believe that we should be political on this show, but there is a lot of turnover in the blue collar world, and because of that, because you have, I'll use forklift. I use forklift a lot as an example, or heavy equipment. The forklift operators need to be trained per OSHA standard
which is a minimum. Nobody understands this. That is a minimum standard. That is not the gold standard. That is, you must have this minimum level of competency before you operate. But it doesn't mean that's a gold standard. There is a much more depth you can do, but once a year, which would be great if you hired everybody once a year at the exact same time and they stayed there and you locked it in. But that's not realistic. You're always having turnover. You're always having people coming and going. So we put together quarterly training programs for most of our customers because the turnover, by the time somebody leaves and joins, you're within 45 days generally to the next training. Well, I think you should be doing that also with multiple languages because you need to be at least having access to the same curriculum and the same data and ask the same questions. The other piece I believe, and I want to get your opinion on this, is do you feel that it is the company's obligation to do every type of communication for every single function for every employee? And it's a big question, and it's not a well, of course, because you can have companies that have 15 different languages and written, and it's like, what should we be doing as an organization to make sure that we give access to things that are available, but not necessarily own it as a company or as an operator?
That is not an easy question, but I'm going to tell you what I truly believe. I mentioned earlier that language is inextricably linked to life. And I do believe that, and I'm not political either, so I'm choosing my words carefully. There's a thought, there's an argument even that people say, you come to this country, you should learn the language. We're going to put that here because it's something that exists. People feel that and they feel it strongly. I would say something to consider, even in that posture, something to consider is, if I hire them, do I not take on a certain level of responsibility to keep them safe? We have the OSHA standards that already require me of that, but I'm talking about just a human standpoint. If I'm taking them on, do I not have a responsibility to keep them safe? So when it comes to all the aspects, you have language, but you also have culture, you have the food, you have the music. Maybe I don't do all of those, but under the umbrella of keeping them safe, yes, I do believe that companies have a responsibility. Now, not everyone is a bleeding heart. I would say that I am. I am a bleeding heart. But bleeding heart and business don't always go together. So let's pull one of them out. If you look at it from a business standpoint, I remember talking to one particular contractor that I respect a lot, but the conversation took a turn I didn't expect, and this is what they expressed. They said, well, they're just subcontractors. I don't even have them that long. They're not even mine. And I said, okay, I hear that. I took it because I think that that's a valid concern. I don't agree with it, but I thought it was a valid concern. Here's what I shared with him that I think it should be considered by all GCs. Your record matters. Your name matters. If there is a subcontractor that comes under your umbrella and they are not addressed, their safety is not a concern to you, you don't address it at all. If there's an injury, and far be it, if there's a fatality, that is a mark on your name. It happened on your site, on your watch, and in the public arena, it will be on your name. So those are things that we have to consider as kind of like a holistic approach. Maybe they're not yours, but when they're on their site, on your projects, they are. So is it your responsibility? Yes. And I think that when we address it holistically, we actually find that you can retain the talent because it's expensive. When they move around and they leave you, you have to repost that job, you have to rehire for that job, and you have to retrain for that job. That's expensive. If we invested in them, now our in-house title for this is language-led workforce development. The idea of workforce development is not strange. Most companies are very focused on investing and upskilling, their current employees because they want them to grow with the machine. Be a cog in the wheel, see yourself here so that we can all grow together. We're simply adding a language component to it and accomplishing the same thing. So when those employees come in and they go, I'm here, I don't know how long, but then you say, no, I want you to stay around. I want to upskill you and I want to help you to function better so you're safe. Where are they going? I wouldn't go anywhere.
No, you wouldn't go anywhere. It's an interesting conversation because one of the things I'm changing a lot of things in an industry that doesn't change very easily. And so it's so true. And it's like you sit there, you're like, there's so many things that I think we could influence and do better. But one of those is this whole notion of every single contractor, subcontractor, and owner has a different obligation and responsibility of the things that they own. And I've often thought, both on the language side, but also on the safety training and standards side, there should be a pool of dollars that for the project that gets a full-time that for everybody on that location and standardizes across it. Because what you're making a decision, and it's an economic decision when you're bidding on a big project, and it requires that you have a safety director or manager or supervisor on location. And then you say, and they need to be speaking the native language and or to be able to communicate with multiple languages. It's unrealistic. And what people do is they run their superintendents or the lead on that project through an OSHA 30 class, and they go, okay, they're my safety person. But they're really also the drywaller, and they're also the guy getting lunch, and they're also the one who's judged on speed and budget. And often speed and budget are the antithesis. Well, it's the antithesis of safety, because everybody should be able to, you see something, you say something, everybody has stop authority. Well, it's kind of like the race to zero. If I've had 400 days of not having an incident, do I want to be the person that actually says, I just cut off the tip of my finger? It's like, nope, I'm just going to throw some dirt on it and tape it up, and I'm going to not tell anybody. That's not a culture you want. That's not a culture that is going to be good for the company or society or the worker. But that's why I'm always challenging that whole days since. But I also have the same issue when it comes to somebody who's not dedicated to the safety programs because of that. Because it's natural. It's understandable. They get bonused on being on time and on budget. Their family needs that. Other people's families need that bonus and so forth. And yet, if you're seeing a scaffolding that happens to be tilting a direction, and you look up and you're like, it's going to be a half a day for us to tear that down and build it back up.
And when you layer language, that exact thing you laid out, you layer language on top of it, you have even more apprehension to say anything. You have even more apprehension to kind of, literally be, the whistleblower, if you will. I don't know that it's quite to that point because you're in the company, but to be the one to stand up is literally, it's literally the proverbial canary in a coal mine when people do not feel safe to be able to say something. There was a training on one site. I was talking to a GC where they had fall protection training, OSHA training, done in English, but several of their guys were Spanish speaking. After it was done, he did what I feel is as an educator, is the worst comprehension check. He goes, everybody
Right.
good?
Thumbs up. Yep.
Thumbs
the
up.
international sign for
Oh
everybody
my
good.
gosh. So of
Oh,
course
my
everybody
goodness
was like,
gracious.
thumbs up all around, go stars.
All right. Okay, everybody feels good.
Everybody feels great. You feel like you have checked
Right.
the box. And he clearly hadn't, because a few moments later, one of the Hispanic workers, Spanish speaking, who clearly did not understand the training, but also gave the thumbs up because he didn't want to stand out, he wraps a rope around his waist and climbs a structure the height of which could have killed him. And they're turning, looking, going, what is he doing up there? We just finished the training. He didn't want to be the one to say, I don't understand. So what do? You give the thumbs up back. That's what, you don't want to be the one to say that you didn't understand, and it could have, resulted in a fatality right there. That apprehension, yeah.
Yeah. So people ask me often from a Yellowbird perspective, what am I most excited about? And I think the reality is that scenario you've just given, where I have localized trainers everywhere across the country, and there's no travel and there's no per diem, and it's very cost effective, and say, will you come out when we're doing the English training and translate for us? And they'll go, well, you can just get a translator. No, you shouldn't just get a translator. You should get a safety professional that speaks Spanish because, and I don't know if this is true, you could actually answer this for me. Is there not a literal translation to the word safety in Spanish?
To actually say the word safety?
Yes. What is the word safety?
Seguridad?
Okay. Because somebody had made that statement and I didn't know. I was going to look it up, but I figured you're already here, so I may as well ask you. But the example they had given, and I smiled and nodded because I didn't really know if that was true or not, but he said it was not literally the same thing, that there was a different description for it. And definitions of these words when they're being translated, and when you're going and doing lockout tagout as an example, and most people don't actually understand the core reason people do lockout tagout, which functionally is that you have a power source that's way far away and you have people working on something that's going to be a motor or something that can hurt you, and you're doing maintenance on it. You lock it at the other end, you shut it down, and you tag it so that somebody can't go and say, oh, my outlet's not working, I'm going to flip this thing on and I'm going to fry Jerry. And we don't want Jerry to be fried. And so that's the reason. But at the end of the day, if you are trying to explain that story or that, anecdote or whatever you want to call it, if you're trying to explain why in another language and you don't use the right words, it could fall flat.
Absolutely. Or just simply be misunderstood. Points are missing. Even though there is a translation for the word safety, I think you mentioned this earlier, that somebody might put out a general safety guidelines. No, those are, like you said, nuanced. So even though there's a word for safety, you need that contextualized. The safety that you would have in a restaurant, the safety that you would have on a construction site, the safety that you would have, doing anything else, it's contextualized. So even though the word safety is translatable, you're still talking about a different type of safety in all of those circumstances. And yes, that has to be nuanced. And I think that you're spot on by requiring that bilingual safety professional would be the one that you would hire instead of just a translator, because they might not understand that process you just laid out.
So as we wrap this, because man, I could talk to you all day, and I enjoyed this so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I've really I appreciate you coming on. So next to native language learning, tell me what you do and tell me how people can reach you and why your mission is what it is, and where you do services and all that kind of stuff, so I can at least promote your wonderful business.
Thank you for that. So yeah, next to native language learning, we essentially provide language-led workforce development in high-risk industries so that you have stronger teams, safer job sites, and you retain top talent. That is us in a nutshell. All of our courses and offerings, our workshops, lunch and learns, all of those are all offered virtually. We do that by design. We all hated COVID, but it taught us how we can get a thing done virtually. It doesn't have to be in person. So we designed our business around that model. So we serve nationwide. Companies, we're in Raleigh, North Carolina, but we could be in Arizona. We're actually starting up with a company in Arizona in the next couple of weeks. So we're completely virtual, and it works out because even though, your employees may be having issues with transportation, everybody has one of these. Who doesn't have a smartphone these days? So you can connect from anywhere. The way that you get in touch with us, of course, I live on LinkedIn. Anyone who knows me, I'm constantly on LinkedIn. Hopefully you like this mug because you'll see it a lot. I talk,
How could they not?
Well, I hope not. I'm getting older. This thing is getting harder. But at any rate, I actually will be speaking at the Chesapeake. I'm looking it up now so I don't get the name wrong. But it's coming up pretty soon. Actually, it's next month, and I'll find the name in a moment. But I often speak at different training or safety and health conference and expo and Chesapeake Region Safety Council. So that's something I'll be doing soon this month. So we do all of this. Of course, we talk about it all on LinkedIn. Of course, you can get in touch with us on our website as well. That's next, the word next, the number 2, the word native.com, or we might say .com. nexttonative.com. And yeah, you can always fill out a form at the bottom. We also, often you'll see our check the box for safety quiz There's some companies who hear what we have to say and they go, am I good? Maybe.
It's a great question. And by the way, that's a good question to ask yourself. That's the beginning of open-mindedness
Because they're
and being
thinking
thoughtful.
about it and they're considering, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm good. I think I'm good. Let me find out. So we often, tell them, take a quiz, take the check the box for safety quiz. And at the end of it, we give you a score, some actual information. And then you have, and if you'd like to, an opportunity to connect with us and have a discovery call and we talk through a matter free of charge. So all of those ways are floating around LinkedIn, or you can come straight to our website. We would love to talk to you and see what we can do to help.
Awesome. And one of the things I will offer you, when you get to a point where you would like to train Yellowbird professionals on how to help you execute some of these things in person, we are growing our Yellowbird network very quickly. It's no cost for any professional to join, to be available, to be a trainer or to be a advisor. We're looking always for multilingual folks, but I would be delighted to put a program together with you. If you say, look, we have a big program, and it usually for us makes the most sense when you start dealing with national organizations and say, we want to do a standardized multilingual program across our 75 locations in 15 states. That's the kind of thing that we can do in person very effectively. And because of our model, you can do it quickly, which is usually the challenge. You're usually online because you need it fast, or you're in person because you have the time. Now there is the other piece of the equation, which is also just the expense with travel and per diems, which we don't have to deal with, which is wonderful. So at some point, let's have that conversation. I think it could be very exciting. And I do that for our customers too. If they have a standardized program that they want to execute, it's a really good thing because we can have the professionals go through it's not really a true train the trainer because these folks are already a trainer, but they need to find out your nuance, your way. And that's an important piece. So thank you so much for having this conversation today. I came in this morning purely for this. I'm going to Kentucky in about an hour, and so I just could not do this morning. I was very excited about it. So I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to thank you so much, and I am going to ask you to please make sure that you use goyellowbird.com as you are looking for resources. And if I can be of help in any way, LinkedIn or otherwise, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to promote. You're doing wonderful work, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.